Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final segment of our Developing a US National PID Strategies video series. This is part 6 on next steps and how do we move this towards consensus in the community. My name is Todd Carpenter, and joining me is John Chodacki. We are the co-chairs of the ORFG PID Strategies Working Group. We're going to be talking now about where we take this project now that the working group has finished its initial draft. Reflecting on the purpose of this project, we set out to define desirable characteristics for PID systems and develop guidance that would be implemented as a national strategy. And we went through a 18 months or so process to develop draft recommendations. We've shared those on Zenodo. The link here is at the bottom of the screen. We're now in the process of a public consultation period where we're circulating the draft recommendations. And we're beginning a process now to move us forward through a national standard setting process within the National Information Standards Organization. Ideally, what we will hope to achieve at the end of this process is a national standard based on the recommendations that were put forward by the working group back in February. And the working group itself recognized that while we were a diverse group, certainly a couple dozen people is hardly representative of the vast US research ecosystem. We put forward some recommendations, but we recognize that we want to bring this to a broader community. We want more participation in the vetting and development of a national standard that can be applied across the entire ecosystem. So in June of 2024, a proposal was submitted to the National Information Standards Organization to develop the recommendations that have been developed and craft them into a national standard that could guide US stakeholders in this community. In July, the proposal was approved by the NISO Leadership Topic Committee that is responsible for information policy and analysis. And that will be sent out to the NISO voting members for consideration and launching as a new project later in the fall of 2024. We expect and hope that this project will move rapidly in the taking the recommendations and bringing them out into a broader community through a NISO standard setting process to aim towards having a formal standard publishable by maybe the end of 2025 or early 2026 at the latest. This process will include both a public call for participation in a NISO working group. NISO membership is not a requirement of participation in that working group. It will include a public review of the draft recommendations, as well as a vetting process on those recommendations before they are published as a US national standard. More information about that project and that process will be made available to the community through NISO, as well as through partnership with the Research Data Alliance as we move through this process. I'm going to pass it over to John to talk about ways in which we'll consider this project a success.
Yeah, so as we move forward with that process that Todd just outlined, we want to make sure that we're not just drafting recommendations for bureaucrats and for us to associate with and deal with on paper, but also we are measuring how they are changing behavior, and we're really looking at the overall effectiveness of a transition to these recommendations. And to do that, we want to make sure that from the very beginning, we have metrics aligned and we understand how we will be measuring success. As part of the report that's already up on Zenodo, we started to brainstorm some of the ways that we might do this. And so in that report, you will see different approaches outlined, and we're hoping to tease those out as we move forward with the NISO process that Todd mentioned. We want to make sure that we're looking not just at quantitative, but also qualitative and results from any sort of new approaches that are developed. We want to look at case studies and impact stories, really understanding how new approaches to persistent identifiers are contributing to more collaboration and more discovery, not just on the technology side, as we've mentioned, but also on the research side. We're actually looking at the efficiencies that are created and the understandings that are created through this types of collaboration, how they impact science and research itself. We also want to look at benchmarking and comparative analysis, so getting a good understanding of where we're at now in many of these areas, and understanding how our approaches as they evolve change the way that people are working on policy and compliance, but also on efficiency gains and really lowering the burden that we have described in previous videos. And so as we think about measuring success for the national PID strategy approaches, we also want to think about, in your institution, how do you interact with this approach? You know, what are you thinking that you may do in the future that could help both with the work that Todd has outlined that's ahead of us as a community, but also how, as we think about the recommendations that we've outlined and that will be coming from future work, how do those impact or how do they work within your local context? We want to think about the benefits that will come from a better understanding of how the US can work together on a national PID strategy and how your organization will fit into those benefits. So we hope that this series has helped you understand the work that we've done, and that can help you understand how you fit into the picture as we move forward. We also want to make sure that you're aware of the resources that are available. Throughout these videos, we have mentioned there is this report that our working group created. It's available up on Zenodo. There's also the discussion of the desirable characteristics of persistent identifiers that we've outlined. That work was discussed in more depth on the Force 11 Upstream blog, and that is available here, linked from here. We also have an article on Scholarly Kitchen that discusses the roadmap and the process that we went through in our previous work. And there is a community discussion forum where we've been conducting a lot of community outreach and having conversations about some of the benefits of persistent identifiers, the benefits of working on this project, but also what are some of the gaps that we have missed so far, and we need to make sure we bring back into the fold as we move forward with new versions of these recommendations. So as we have stated before, we really do want to make sure that we thank those that have helped facilitate and convene this work. Our working group was convened by ORFG in collaboration with Helios Open and Spark, and we thank them very much for their support of bringing us together and helping us with this effort up till now. We also really want to thank RDA and the work that they put into putting national PID strategies, the structures, and information that they've had and that has helped form our approach. We also want to thank RDA-US and the RDA-US TIGRUS facilitation program for helping with the outreach that we're doing here with this series and in other ways. And also the Pervasive Technology Institute at Indiana University, which hosts RDA-US and has been a great help to both Todd and I in the entire effort of getting this national PID strategy project off the ground. With that, we thank you, and this concludes this series, and we appreciate it, and we look forward for your continued support. And please look out for ways for you to join us as we move into that NISO standards process that Todd has mentioned. We appreciate you. Appreciate your time.